The silence in Mrs. Henderson's English class is so thick you could cut it with a knife, but Emma's voice slices through it like a blade dipped in poison. "Dear Diary," she begins, her voice dripping with mock sweetness that makes my skin crawl. "I think Marcus finally noticed me today when he helped me pick up my books." I'm standing frozen at the front of the classroom, my heart hammering against my ribs as I watch my stepsister hold my most private thoughts like a loaded weapon. Every word she reads feels like a physical blow, each sentence another nail in the coffin of whatever dignity I had left. The worst part, I can see the exact moment each of my classmates decides I'm pathetic. "Maybe there's hope that someone could actually love me," Emma continues, and the entire class erupts in laughter that feels like glass shards piercing my ears. Sarah Martinez is literally doubled over, tears streaming down her face from laughing so hard. Jake Thompson is making exaggerated kissing sounds while pointing at Marcus, who's sitting 3 rows back, his face a mask of uncomfortable embarrassment. But here's what Emma doesn't know. What none of these cruel teenagers snickering at my expense could possibly understand. This isn't my first time living through this nightmare. 3 months ago, I died. Not metaphorically, not dramatically. Literally died. Car accident on graduation night, wrapped around a tree on Highway 47 because I was crying too hard to see the road through my tears. The last thing I remembered was Emma's voice echoing in my head, all the years of her poison finally achieving what she'd always wanted. My complete destruction. Yet somehow, impossibly, I woke up in my 16-year-old body 6 months ago, lying in my childhood bedroom with sunlight streaming through curtains I hadn't seen in years. At first, I thought it was just a vivid dream, some cruel trick my dying brain was playing on me. But then, Emma walked in without knocking, that same entitled smirk on her face, and I knew with crystalline clarity that I'd been given something most people only dream of. A second chance. She even writes about how she wishes she was brave enough to stand up to me, Emma says now, her eyes gleaming with that familiar jealous hatred she's carried since the day our parents got married. She's always resented everything about me, how I excel in academics while she struggles to maintain a C average, how teachers praise my writing while hers goes unnoticed, how I seem to find joy in small things while she drowns in her own bitterness. The irony is almost beautiful. She has no idea that every word she's mocking, every secret she's exposing, every moment of my humiliation is being carefully catalogued in my mind for a purpose she can't even begin to imagine. I catch Marcus's eye across the room, and something interesting happens. Instead of the pity and secondhand embarrassment I saw in my first life, there's something else entirely. Recognition, respect, even admiration for the raw honesty of my words. The other students have stopped laughing too, some looking genuinely uncomfortable as Emma's cruelty becomes impossible to ignore. "That's enough, Emma," Mrs. Henderson finally intervenes, but the damage is done. Or so Emma thinks. As I walk back to my seat on shaking legs, Emma whispers just loud enough for me to hear, "Now everyone knows what a pathetic loser you really are, stepsister." But I just smile, because Emma has just made the biggest mistake of both her lives. She's given me the perfect material for my masterpiece. The rest of the day passes in a blur of sideways glances and whispered conversations. In my first life, this moment broke me. I spent the remaining months until graduation day becoming smaller and smaller, shrinking into myself until I was barely a shadow. Emma's bullying escalated, my grades suffered, and I graduated feeling like a ghost of who I used to be. Not this time. That night, I sit at my desk with a fresh notebook, my hand moving across the page with purpose I've never felt before. I'm not writing in my diary anymore. Diaries are for secrets, for shame, for things you want to hide. I'm writing something else entirely. A story about a girl who gets a second chance to rewrite her destiny. As I write, Emma's voice echoes in my memory, reading my most vulnerable thoughts to a room full of teenagers who devoured my pain like entertainment. But now, every cruel laugh, every moment of humiliation, every act of sabotage is being transformed into something she never saw coming. Literary gold. The next morning at breakfast, Emma can barely contain her glee as she recounts yesterday's events to our parents, spinning it as harmless sibling teasing while making sure to emphasise how dramatic I was being about the whole thing. Mum and David, my stepfather, exchange those tired looks that parents get when they think their teenagers are being teenagers. Maybe next time you'll be more careful with your private things, Emma says, stabbing her pancakes with unnecessary force. Maybe I will, I reply, and there's something in my tone that makes her look up sharply. For just a moment, I see uncertainty flicker across her face. Good, she should be uncertain. At school, I do something that surprises everyone, including myself. When Marcus approaches me at my locker, clearly struggling with whether to mention yesterday's incident, I look him directly in the eye and say, "Thank you." "For what?" he asks, confused. "For not laughing," I reply simply. His face softens in a way that tells me everything I need to know about how this second chance is already changing things. Those things you wrote, they were really honest. Brave, even. Emma was wrong to do that to you. In my first life, Marcus and I never had this conversation. We never had any real conversation, actually. But now, with the knowledge of everything that's coming, I can see possibilities I was blind to before. She was, I agree. But sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the most important things that ever happened to us. He doesn't understand what I mean yet, but he will. That afternoon, I stay after school to talk to Mrs. Henderson about the creative writing contest she mentioned in passing last week, something I was too scared to pursue in my first life. She's surprised by my sudden interest, especially after yesterday's incident, but there's something in her eyes that tells me she sees potential in me that even I'm just beginning to understand. "I want to write about second chances," I tell her. "That's a powerful theme," she says thoughtfully. "What kind of second chances?" I think about Emma's face as she read my diary, about the way she savoured every word of my pain, about how she has no idea that she's just planted the seeds of her own downfall. The kind that come with a price, I say. As I walk home, I pass Emma at the local coffee shop where she works part-time, complaining to her friend Jessica about how unfair it is that I get better grades despite being such a freak. She doesn't see me listening from behind the magazine rack, doesn't notice me filing away every bitter word for future use. But I see her. I see everything now. And Emma has no idea what's coming. 6 weeks after the diary incident, something extraordinary happens. I win the state creative writing contest with a story called Second Chances. Mrs. Henderson announces it during homeroom, her voice filled with pride as she explains how my piece was selected from over 3,000 entries across the state. The room falls silent, and I can feel Emma's eyes burning holes in the back of my head. In my first life, I never even entered this contest. I was too broken, too convinced that my words were worthless after Emma's public humiliation. But this time, I poured every ounce of pain, every moment of rebirth knowledge, every detail of my second chance into those pages. The judges called it hauntingly beautiful and remarkably mature for a high school student, Mrs. Henderson continues, and I watch Marcus turn in his seat to give me a genuine smile. Several other classmates nod approvingly, and I realise something crucial. Emma's diary stunt backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying my reputation, she inadvertently revealed my writing talent to people who mattered. After class, Emma corners me in the hallway, her face twisted with the kind of rage she usually keeps hidden from teachers. "You think you're so special now, don't you?" she hisses, shoving me against the lockers. "One stupid contest win doesn't change anything. You're still the same pathetic freak who writes love letters to herself." But here's what Emma doesn't understand. In my first life, her words would have shattered me. Now, they're just material. You're right, I say calmly, adjusting my backpack strap. One contest win doesn't change anything, but it's a good start. Something in my tone makes her step back, uncertainty flickering across her features. For the first time in both our lives, Emma looks genuinely unsettled by my lack of reaction to her cruelty. That afternoon, I receive a call that changes everything. Jennifer Walsh, a literary agent from New York, heard about my contest win through her daughter who attends a rival high school. She wants to meet with me about developing my story into a full-length novel. Your piece has something special, she tells me over the phone, her voice crackling through our old landline. There's a maturity to your writing that's rare in someone your age. The way you handle themes of rebirth and revenge, it's sophisticated beyond your years. If only she knew how literally true that was. I arranged to meet her the following weekend at a cafe in the city, telling my parents I'm going to the library to research colleges. Emma overhears and makes some snide comment about me putting on airs, but I barely register her words anymore. I'm too busy planning my real revenge, the kind that will take months to unfold, but will be absolutely devastating when it does. The meeting with Jennifer exceeds my wildest expectations. She's a sharp woman in her 40s with silver streaking through her black hair and eyes that seem to see straight through people. When I show her the expanded outline I've been working on, a story about a girl who uses her knowledge of the future to systematically dismantle the life of her tormentor, her eyes light up with genuine excitement. This could be huge, she says, leaning forward across the small cafe table. The young adult market is hungry for stories about empowerment and female revenge. But more than that, your voice is authentic. You write pain like someone who's lived it. I have, I tell her simply. She offers me a contract on the spot, something virtually unheard of for an unpublished teenage writer. I'll receive a modest advance, but more importantly, she believes the book could be a bestseller if I can maintain the quality of my contest entry throughout an entire novel. I sign the papers with hands that don't shake, even though my heart is racing. Emma has no idea that her moment of cruelty 6 weeks ago just launched my professional writing career. Over the next 3 months, I live a double life. During the day, I'm just another high school student enduring Emma's increasingly desperate attempts to regain her social dominance. She spreads rumours about me, tries to sabotage my friendships, and even goes so far as to accidentally spill coffee on my laptop, not knowing I back up everything to the cloud now. But at night, I write with the fury of someone who has literally died and been reborn for this purpose. Every scene flows from my fingertips like I'm remembering rather than creating. The protagonist, Vera, experiences the same diary humiliation, the same systematic bullying, the same eventual death that I did. But then she gets her second chance, and she uses it to methodically destroy her tormentor's life from the shadows. The most delicious part is how closely Vera's stepsister Eliza mirrors Emma, not just in cruelty, but in her desperate need to be the centre of attention, her jealousy of others' success, her complete inability to see how her actions create her own downfall. By Christmas, I have 200 pages of pure literary revenge, and Jennifer is beside herself with excitement. This is going to be bigger than we thought, she tells me during one of our monthly check-ins. I'm already getting interest from publishers based on the sample chapters. One editor called it Carrie meets Groundhog Day with the emotional intelligence of a much older writer. Meanwhile, Emma's behaviour becomes increasingly erratic as my reputation at school continues to improve. Teachers praise my work, I'm elected to the Honour Society, and Marcus finally asks me to the winter formal, something that never happened in my first life because I was too broken to function socially by that point. The night of the dance, Emma makes her most desperate play yet. She gets drunk at a house party and shows up at the school gym, screaming about how I'm a fake and how everyone needs to remember what a pathetic loser I really am. She even tries to recreate the diary incident, pulling out her phone to read screenshots she took of my most embarrassing entries. But something magical happens. Nobody laughs. Instead, several of my classmates step forward to defend me, including Marcus, who firmly but kindly escorts Emma outside while she rants about how unfair life is. "She's jealous," Sarah Martinez, the same girl who laughed the hardest at my humiliation months ago, tells me as we fix our makeup in the bathroom afterward. "It's obvious she can't handle you being successful." As I stare at my reflection in the fluorescent lit mirror, I realise that my revenge is already working in ways I never anticipated. Emma is destroying herself through her own bitterness, while I'm building something beautiful from the ashes of my first life. The real twist comes 3 weeks later when Emma does something that even my future knowledge didn't prepare me for. She tries to steal my novel. I discover it purely by accident, walking past David's home office and seeing Emma frantically typing at his computer. When I peer through the crack in the door, I see my own words on the screen, entire chapters from my book in progress that she somehow accessed and is now trying to pass off as her own work for her senior English portfolio. In my first life, this would have devastated me. I would have confronted her, caused a scene, probably gotten in trouble with our parents for making false accusations, when Emma inevitably lied her way out of it. But this time, I just smile and quietly take photos of her in the act with my phone. Because Emma has just handed me the perfect final chapter for my book and given me evidence that will make her literary theft impossible to deny when the time comes. As I slip away unnoticed, I can't help but think about how perfectly this mirrors the story I'm writing. Eliza, desperate and jealous, makes increasingly reckless attempts to sabotage Vera, never realizing that each cruel act is being carefully documented and transformed into the very weapon that will ultimately destroy her. Emma thinks she's stealing my work, but really, she's just adding more material to her own downfall. And the best part? She has no idea that in 6 months, when my book hits the shelves, everyone will know exactly who inspired the villain. The phone call from Jennifer comes on a Tuesday morning in March, just as I'm getting ready for school. "Sit down," she says, and I can hear the barely contained excitement in her voice. "HarperCollins wants your book. They're offering a 6-figure advance and a 2-book deal." I have to bite my lip to keep from screaming with joy. In my first life, I died believing I was worthless, that my words meant nothing. Now, at 17, I'm about to become a published author with a major publishing house backing me. "There's more," Jennifer continues. "They want a fast-track publication. If we can get the final manuscript to them by June, they'll have Echoes of Tomorrow in bookstores by October. They think it could be their lead title for the holiday season." As I hang up the phone, I realise the timeline is perfect. October, just 2 weeks after graduation, just 1 week before the anniversary of my death in my first life. The symmetry is almost poetic. Emma's reaction to my increasing success becomes increasingly unhinged. When news of my book deal leaks through our small town's gossip network, she has what can only be described as a complete meltdown during dinner. "It's not fair," she shrieks, throwing her fork across the dining room, where it clatters against the wall. "She gets everything handed to her. Perfect grades, college acceptance letters, and now this? What about me? What about my dreams?" David tries to reason with her, explaining that hard work pays off, but Emma isn't hearing any of it. She storms out, screaming something about how the whole world is against her, and how I'm a spoiled brat who doesn't deserve anything good. What she doesn't know, what she can't know, is that I've been documenting every one of these outbursts. The attempted plagiarism, the jealous rages, the increasingly desperate attempts to sabotage my relationships and opportunities. All of it is going into my book, making the villain more authentic with each passing day. The most delicious irony comes in May, when Emma's English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, contacts David about suspected plagiarism in Emma's senior portfolio. Several passages in her supposedly original creative writing pieces match published work found online. Work that happens to be excerpts from my soon-to-be-published novel that I shared in writing workshops and contest submissions. The confrontation in David's office is everything I could have hoped for. Emma, faced with the evidence I'd been quietly gathering for months, breaks down completely. She admits to stealing my work, but tries to justify it by claiming I stole her ideas first, and that she's the one who really understands pain and suffering. Emma, David says, his voice heavy with disappointment, this isn't just about the plagiarism. This is about a pattern of behaviour toward your stepsister that your mother and I have been willfully blind to for too long. For the first time in both our lives, there are real consequences for Emma's actions. She's suspended from school, has to repeat her senior English class over the summer, and her college acceptance is revoked pending an investigation into academic dishonesty. But I'm not done with her yet. Not even close. The months leading up to publication pass in a whirlwind of editing, marketing meetings, and interview preparation. Jennifer arranges for me to do my first book signing at the largest bookstore in our state capital, a massive Barnes & Noble that can accommodate the crowd they're expecting. Early buzz is incredible, she tells me during one of our final prep calls. The advanced reviews are calling it a masterpiece of teenage revenge fiction and an unflinching look at how trauma can be transformed into triumph. Publishers Weekly gave it a starred review. What makes it even more perfect is that Emma has no idea any of this is happening. She's been so consumed with her own academic scandal and the social fallout from her plagiarism being exposed at school that she hasn't been paying attention to my career. She knows I sold a book, but she has no concept of how big this has become. The day of the launch arrives on a crisp Saturday in October. I'm wearing a black dress, not because it's fashionable, but because it feels like a funeral outfit for Emma's reputation. The bookstore is packed beyond capacity. There's a line of people stretching around the building, local news crews interviewing readers, and a display of my book that takes up an entire front window. Echoes of Tomorrow, with its haunting cover of a girl's silhouette against a swirling background of diary pages and time fragments, is stacked everywhere. It's surreal seeing my name in large print, knowing that thousands of people are about to read the story of how I turned my deepest humiliation into my greatest victory. I'm halfway through the signing when I see her. Emma pushes through the crowd, clutching a worn copy of my book with desperate fingers, her face a mask of barely controlled rage and disbelief. She looks terrible. Her hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same clothes she's had for years, because her part-time job at the coffee shop barely covers her expenses now that college is off the table. The moment she reaches my table, I know she's read it. The way her hands shake, the way her eyes burn with a mixture of fury and devastation, tells me everything I need to know. She's recognised herself in every page, seen her own cruelty reflected back at her through Eliza's character, watched her own downfall play out through my literary lens. "Hello, Emma," I say sweetly, my pen poised over the title page. "I see you've bought my book. Would you like me to make it out to anyone special?" The words are carefully chosen, designed to echo the promotional materials that have been circulating for weeks about how the book is inspired by real events and dedicated to everyone who ever turned their pain into power. "You," she starts, then stops, her voice catching. The line behind her is getting restless, but I have all the time in the world for this moment I've been orchestrating for over a year. Perhaps to my biggest inspiration, I continue, my voice carrying just enough volume for the people nearby to hear. Or maybe the girl who taught me that sometimes the best revenge is massive success. Her face goes white as she realises what's happening. Not only have I turned her cruelty into literary gold, but now she's literally paying me for the privilege of owning the story of her own destruction. The twisted irony isn't lost on either of us as I sign my name with a flourish. But then, something unexpected happens. As Emma stands there clutching the book that contains her humiliation made public, tears start streaming down her face. Not tears of rage, tears of genuine anguish and what might actually be recognition of how far she's fallen. "I know what I did to you was wrong," she whispers so quietly only I can hear. "I know I ruined everything for both of us, but did you have to destroy my entire life to get back at me?" For just a moment, I feel something I didn't expect. A flicker of the girl I used to be, the one who might have felt pity for her stepsister's obvious pain. But then I remember the car accident, the loneliness, the years of systematic cruelty that led to my death in my first life. "You destroyed your own life, Emma," I reply calmly. "I just wrote about it." She opens the book to the dedication page, and I watch her face crumple as she reads the words I spent weeks perfecting. "To everyone who has ever been told their pain doesn't matter, may you find the strength to transform your wounds into weapons and your silence into stories that cannot be ignored." But it's the personal note I've written just for her that makes her stumble backward as if she's been physically struck. "Thank you for reading my diary that day, Emma. Without you, I never would have known that my most private thoughts were actually my most powerful weapon. P.S. Wait until you read the sequel about what happens to jealous stepsisters who underestimate the girls they try to break. Coming next spring." As she reads those final words, something fundamental shifts in Emma's expression. The rage drains away, replaced by something that looks almost like fear, because suddenly she understands that this isn't the end of my revenge. It's just the beginning. She stumbles away from the table, clutching the book like it's burning her hands but unable to let it go. I watch her push through the crowd of happy readers, all of whom are praising my incredible imagination and brilliant character development, having no idea they're looking at the real-life inspiration for the villain they love to hate. The signing continues for another 3 hours, with reader after reader telling me how much they connected with Vera's journey, how they've experienced similar bullying, how my book made them feel less alone. A teenage girl with tears in her eyes tells me that Eliza reminds her of her own tormentor, and that seeing Vera's triumph gave her hope. "The sequel?" she asked shyly. "Will it show what happens to Eliza? Does she ever realise what she's done?" I smile, thinking of Emma's retreating figure, thinking of the conversation I'm going to have with Jennifer tomorrow about my ideas for book 2, thinking of how this is only the beginning of a career built on transforming pain into power. "Oh," she realises, I tell the girl, but by then, it's far too late to change anything. The best she can do is live with the consequences of her choices. As the last reader leaves and I pack up my signing materials, I catch sight of myself in the bookstore's security mirror. I look different than I did in my first life, stronger, more confident, more alive. Emma tried to break me, but instead she forged me into something unbreakable. And the beautiful thing is, this is only the first chapter of my revenge story. Emma has no idea what I've planned for book 2. 3 weeks after the book signing, something happens that I never saw coming, even with my knowledge of the future. Emma attempts suicide. David finds her in the garage with the car running, a copy of my book open on her lap to the page where Eliza's life completely falls apart. She's rushed to the hospital, and for 48 hours we don't know if she'll survive. As I sit in that sterile waiting room, staring at the fluorescent lights and listening to the steady beep of machines, I'm forced to confront something I've been avoiding for months. Maybe I went too far. When Emma finally wakes up, she's different. The fire that once burned in her eyes, even when it was twisted by jealousy and cruelty, is completely extinguished. She won't look at me, won't speak to anyone except the therapist they assigned to her case. The doctors say she's suffering from severe depression and that the public humiliation from my book was the final trigger in what they call a perfect storm of mental health issues. For the first time since my rebirth, I feel something I didn't expect: guilt. But then Jennifer calls with news that changes everything again. "The book is exploding," she says, her voice crackling with excitement through my phone. "We're at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list, and Netflix wants to option the film rights. But there's something else, something bigger." She pauses, and I can practically hear her grinning through the phone. "Emma's story broke. Someone leaked details about your real-life stepsister's suicide attempt and how it connects to your book. The media is calling it the most devastating literary revenge in modern history. Publishers are in a bidding war for your sequel rights." My blood runs cold. Someone leaked what? A local journalist connected the dots between Emma's plagiarism scandal, her suicide attempt, and the character of Eliza in your novel. The story's gone viral. #echoes of revenge is trending on social media. People are fascinated by the idea that you literally turned your bully's cruelty into a best-selling novel that drove her to attempt suicide. I hang up the phone with shaking hands, immediately opening social media on my laptop. The hashtag is everywhere, thousands of posts analysing my book, comparing Emma's real-life downfall to Eliza's fictional one, debating whether literary revenge can go too far. Some people are calling me a genius, others are calling me a monster. But the worst part? The comments from people who claim to know Emma, sharing photos and stories that paint a picture I was too blinded by revenge to see clearly. Emma struggling with depression since her parents' divorce. Emma working double shifts at the coffee shop to help pay for therapy she couldn't afford. Emma's mother talking about how her daughter had been self-harming for years, long before I ever wrote my book. And then I see a video that makes my entire world crumble. It's from Emma's phone, apparently recorded the night of her suicide attempt. She's sitting in her car, tears streaming down her face, holding my book with trembling hands. "I know what I did to her was unforgivable," she says to the camera, her voice barely a whisper. "I was so jealous, so angry at the world, so desperate to feel like I mattered that I turned her into my target. But I need everyone to know something about my stepsister that she'll never tell you herself." She takes a shuddering breath, and what she says next destroys everything I thought I knew about my own story. The diary I read in class that day. She left it on my desk on purpose. She knew I'd read it, knew I wouldn't be able to resist using it against her. And when I did, she didn't look humiliated. She looked satisfied. Like I'd just played right into her hands. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely hold my phone as Emma continues. "I think she's been planning this revenge since long before that day in English class. I think she manipulated me into becoming the villain she needed for her story. And the worst part is, it worked. She got everything she wanted, the fame, the success, the perfect revenge plot, and all it cost was my life." The video ends with Emma apologising to me, saying she hopes her death will finally give me the satisfaction I've been seeking. But she's wrong about one crucial thing. She didn't die. And now I have to live with the possibility that I orchestrated my own victimization to justify the revenge I'd been planning all along. The media attention becomes a nightmare. Reporters camp outside our house trying to get interviews about the girl who turned family drama into literary gold. My book sales skyrocket, but so does the backlash. Mental health advocates are calling for boycotts, saying I've weaponized depression for profit. Literary critics are debating whether my success is built on authentic trauma or calculated manipulation. But the real twist comes when David sits me down a week later with a box I've never seen before. "I found this in Emma's room while cleaning," he says, his face grave. "I think you need to see what's inside." The box contains dozens of notebooks filled with Emma's handwriting. As I flip through them, my heart sinks deeper with each page. They're journals dating back 3 years, long before the diary incident, long before my rebirth. And they tell a story that shatters everything I believed about my first life. Emma writes about her depression, her feelings of inadequacy, her desperate need for attention and love. But she also writes about me, and what she reveals makes me question everything. "She's so perfect," one entry reads, "gets straight A's without even trying. Teachers love her. Even Mum and David prefer her to me. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be her." But then I see how she looks at me sometimes, like she's studying me, taking notes, like she's waiting for me to do something terrible so she can use it against me. Another entry, dated just 2 days before the diary incident. "Found her diary on my desk again today. She always leaves it there when she knows I'm having a bad day, like she wants me to read it. I know I should just give it back, but there's something in her eyes lately, like she's daring me to cross the line. Maybe if I give her what she seems to want, she'll finally leave me alone." The final entry is dated the night before my death in my first life. "She's been different since the diary thing, not hurt like I expected, but almost triumphant, like everything went according to plan." I keep thinking about that look she gave me after I finished reading, like she'd won something. What if I wasn't the bully? What if I was just the weapon she needed to forge herself into something stronger? As I closed the last notebook, I realised the horrifying truth that Emma figured out before I did. I didn't get a second chance to escape my victimisation. I got a second chance to perfect it. In my first life, I was an accidental victim who turned my pain into strength. But in this life, armed with the knowledge of how that story would end, I became something much more calculated. I manipulated Emma into becoming the perfect villain for my narrative, left breadcrumbs for her to follow, created situations where her worst impulses would surface at exactly the right moments. I didn't just turn my trauma into triumph, I manufactured the trauma to guarantee the triumph. The media will never know this truth. My readers will never suspect that their beloved underdog story is actually the confession of a master manipulator. Jennifer is already pushing for the sequel, convinced that the controversy will only boost sales. But as I sit in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of Emma's genuine pain and my calculated cruelty, I have to make a choice. Do I continue the lie that's made me rich and famous? Do I write the sequel that will cement my reputation as the girl who turned bullying into literary gold? Or do I tell the truth, that sometimes the victim and the villain are the same person, and that the most dangerous people are those who learn to weaponize their own suffering? I pick up my pen and start to write. Not the sequel Jennifer wants, not the continuation of my revenge fantasy, but something else entirely. A story about a girl who gets a second chance at life and discovers that being the victim was easier than being the villain. A story about how the line between justice and cruelty disappears when you're writing your own narrative. A story about how some rebirths aren't gifts, they're curses that force you to confront who you really are when all the excuses are stripped away. As I write the first words of my real confession, I realise that Emma was right about one thing. I did get everything I wanted. The fame, the success, the perfect revenge story. But what she couldn't have known, what I'm only now beginning to understand, is that getting everything you want sometimes means discovering you never deserved any of it in the first place. The real question isn't whether Emma will survive her suicide attempt. It's whether I can survive the truth about who I've become. And unlike my fictional characters, I don't get to control how this story ends. Some rebirths, I'm learning, are just elaborate ways of destroying yourself all over again. But this time, I'll be the one paying the price.